Hey, how you doing? Rob here for another Saturday Grove. And warning, today I may upset a few people, which usually means we're wandering somewhere more interesting. Now, firstly, this whole talk today has been triggered because I've just finished reading one of the most frustrating, turgid magical books I've read in a long time. In fact, I wouldn't even give it the honor of calling it a magical book. You know, the sort of thing, sacred mysteries, hidden goddess wisdom, ancient Celtic dream magic, silver mist, drifting across moonlit landscapes while somebody somewhere invokes an incredibly misunderstood deity over a cup of herbal tea. About 3 pages in, I kind of start getting twitchy. Halfway through, I was beginning to mutter things at the book that I won't repeat here. And by the end of it, I was sat there thinking this. This book right here is exactly why magical people need to do their homework. Because somewhere along the line, modern spirituality appears to have developed this strange habit of believing almost any sort of dross as long as it sounds mystical enough. Mention moon goddesses, sacred feminine, hidden druid wisdom, ancient mysteries, star magic, divine energies, and suddenly, for some unknown reason, people stop questioning things. Now, don't get me wrong before somebody in the comment goes, Rob's become a rationalist. No, I'm not attacking spirituality. I'm not attacking Reconstructionism. I'm not attacking modern magical practice. I am a modern magical practitioner. We're all modern people trying to reconnect with old mysteries through fragments, poetry, symbols, archaeology, mythology, intuition, experience, and whatever little scraps history has left behind. And that's part of the beauty of it. But there's a huge difference between mythology, poetic, inspiration, reconstructionism, symbolism, personal gnosis, historical evidence, and somebody just making stuff up because it sounds nice in a workshop and it'll sell books. Add a few candles, a little sparkle, well, hey, bestseller. And the danger begins when people stop telling you which one they're doing. Because modern spirituality often presents interpretation as certainty, and repetition, as we looked at last week, creates glamour. Definition equals reality. If enough books repeat the same thing over and over and over again, eventually people stop questioning whether it's true. And that's magic in itself. Not the fluffy wand-waving kind, the real kind, the shaping of perception, the shaping of reality through narrative and repetition. And one of the biggest places this seems to happen is with deities and mythic figures. If you take Arianrhod, I'm using Arianrhod because it's straight out of the book. Now, Arianrhod is a fascinating, genuinely fascinating character. And I think part of why she's so fascinating is because she resists simplification. But modern spirituality often presents her as this soft, loving lunar goddess figure, silver wheel, moon goddess, sacred feminine, cosmic mother, feminine mystery, floaty silver moonlight, and all that kind of stuff. But then if you actually go and read the Mabinogion, which is how we know about her, and suddenly you realize, hang on a minute, this isn't quite the same figure at all, because in the actual story, she's really difficult. She rejects Clu, refuses to name him, places Tingedthau upon him, creating barriers, cursing, creating ordeals, creates challenges. There's pride there, there's serenity there, there's reactivity there, there's complexity. And what's interesting to me is not whether she's good or bad. That's a modern way of looking at it. Old mythic figures rarely fit into neat moral categories. They are forces, currents. And Arianrhod feels far more like fate identity, an ordeal sovereignty transformation through difficulty than gentle moon mom. She's the hard lesson you're going to learn. She's the thing that's going to make you earn your stripes. She's also very self-centered within the stories. So, you know, for instance, this book I was reading was like, oh, she's great. She's really supportive and nurturing and loving. No, no, no. And the danger is that you go and invoke an archetype. Now, some people see the gods as being real, some see them just being archetypes, but the danger is that archetype is there in the collective unconscious. That deity is out there. That energy doesn't change just because a few dodgy authors write something different about it. And you go call that up, that's like ordering just a margarita pizza and finding out that you've actually got a hell of a lot of chilies underneath that. It's going to bite you. Am I saying that that invalidates modern spiritual experience of Arianrhod? No, not at all. But what it does mean is that we should be careful about pretending our modern emotional interpretation is exactly what the original material was saying. Because the moment we stop distinguishing between myth interpretation and reconstruction and historical certainty, we start drifting into glamour. And honestly, I think a lot of modern spirituality unconsciously domesticates ancient forces. We reshape difficult myths and different difficult beings and deities into emotionally comforting archetypes because that's what modern people often want spirituality to be. Therapeutic, affirming, safe. But mythology was never particularly safe. The old gods are strange. And they should be strange because they emerge from places in the human psyche and the collective imagination that are older than modern self-help culture. And if you're going to work magically with symbols and archetypes and gods and stories and currents of consciousness, then understanding the shape of myth really matters because symbols shape perception. Got a way of working with people where you literally change their symbols and it changes aspects of their lives. And perception shapes reality. If I approach Arianrhod expecting one thing, but the actual mythic currents around her is another, I may completely misunderstand the experience I'm having. What's more, it can cause damage. I've met people who in fact, there's a dear old friend of mine who was doing some magical work, didn't research properly the deities he was doing, and ended up 2 years having mental health problems and literally having to step away from everything because of the inner damage he did by not researching his deities properly. Magical work is not fantasy role play, at least not if you're taking it seriously. And then on the other side of things, we have, I don't want to just seem like I'm picking on goddesses, so let's look at Cernunnos. And honestly, Cernunnos is almost the exact opposite problem because with Arianrhod, the myth exists and modern spirituality selectively edits it. There are certain authors over there since the 80s and 90s who've done a lot of damage to the reality of our mythic culture by putting their own agenda into it rather than doing straight translation. With Cernunnos, we barely know anything with any certainty at all. Yet modern paganism often speaks about him with extraordinary confidence. Now again, I love the Cernunnos imagery. Big antlers, talks, wild nature symbolism. See the seated horned figure. The whole thing is visually powerful. But historically, we actually have so little about what that deity is about. And that's important to understand. Modern spirituality has largely created and turned Cernunnos into a forest dad, sacred masculine, peaceful nature guardian, woodland consciousness maybe, ancient druid god of nature. And some of these symbolic associations may be beautiful and meaningful and spiritually powerful, but we have to be honest. A huge of that is complete reconstruction and modern projection, which again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with reconstruction. Human beings have always done reconstruction. The problem begins when reconstructions get presented as unquestionable ancient fact. Because then glamour has entered the system. You're living an illusion. Repeat something enough. Cernunnos is this. Cernunnos is that. Ancient Druids believe this. Celtic spirituality was this. Eventually, people stop questioning where the information actually comes from. Just take it, spoon-fed it as though it's truth. And that's where it gets dangerous. One author quotes another author or even just goes from somebody's blog on a website. And and it gets quoted by another and another, and somebody's poetic reconstruction of the 1970s gets blended into that, and suddenly everybody thinks it's ancient historical truth. And this is where your magical homework matters. Read the myths for yourself, because it's not how they speak to others, it's not how the person that wants to sell you a book sees it that matters, it's how it resonates with you when you go to the sources. You go to the original, read the Mabinogion, think about those stories, ponder them, go for walks in the outside world and mull them over in your mind, contemplate these things. You know, don't just read the first book. Mabinogion in our house, we've got about 6 different translations. The Book of Taliesin, I've got 2 different translations of that. One is by some of the top Welsh scholars in translating ancient Welsh, and the other is by some well-known pagan authors, and the difference is phenomenal. It's like somebody somewhere rewrote the story for their own purpose. That's all I'm saying. And it's not the people that want to be taken seriously as academics. Read scholarship, but then read poetry, and then read your reconstructionist materials. Read mystical material, but learn to distinguish between them. That's discernment. That's a mature magical mindset. And honestly, I think discernment is one of the most magical skills we can develop, because the real danger in spirituality is not that people believe strange things. We've always done that. Human beings have always believed strange things. The danger is when people surrender discernment because something just sounds mystical enough, or it fits the image, matches the costume. And I think social media has really amplified this enormously. You know, aesthetic spirituality is everywhere now, and it's beautiful. Some lovely images and some wonderful things. A quote over the moon, someone in flowing robes talking about ancient wisdom with soft music in the background, and people instantly go, wow, yes, look, they look cosmic, it's true. No, it may be true. It may be poetry. It may be symbolism, it may be fantasy, it may be projection of that person's own issues. It could be absolute bollocks. Discernment matters. And the irony is, real magical practice should make you harder to be hypnotized, not easier. Real serious magical practice should help you to see more clearly, to not get caught up in the glamour. And that's the whole point. The deeper you go into magic and mysticism, the more aware you become of the projections, symbolisms, suggestions and glamour, the narrative identity and emotional manipulation, not less aware of them. And yet, weirdly, parts of unspirituality encourage the exact opposite. People surrender themselves completely to gurus, aesthetics online, personalities looking fashionably weird and wonderful, spiritual tribalism without ever stopping to ask, hang on, a bit like my cup of tea, where does this actually come from? Thank you, Fee. And honestly, some of the deepest practitioners I've ever met over the years tend to become less and less dogmatic, not more. They become very comfortable in going, I don't know. This may be interpretation. This may be symbolic. This may be reconstructionism. That is spiritual and magical maturity. The beginner says, I've discovered the ancient secret. The deeper practitioner says, this is far stranger and more complex than I ever first realized. And I think that's healthy, because myths are alive. Not because they're historically frozen, but because they continue speaking through us. But if we approach them lazily, if we flatten them, if we turn them into an aesthetic identity accessory, then we lose something important. And honestly, I think modern spirituality sometimes encourages people to collect identities rather than undergo transformation. I'm this, I'm pagan, I'm a druid, I'm a magician, I'm a warlock, I'm a ego. Magical path should take us away from that. I work with this deity. I'm part fairy moon priestess with Atlantean energy. Wonderful. But are you actually changing or growing? Because there's a lot of people that I've met over the years who speak like from that place, and they're still facing the same problems and challenges in their lives now that they did 10 years ago. If your magical spiritual path is not transforming you and changing you and how you show up in the world, then it's not really a magical spiritual path. Uh, are you becoming more aware, more grounded? Are you becoming more compassionate, more conscious, more awake? Or are you just collecting symbolic accessories for the ego? And yes, before anybody says it, I have absolutely owned questionable mystical clothing over the years. There's probably some photographs somewhere to show it. Um, and I think probably some of it might even be better ritually destroyed. But genuinely, the longer I've walked this path, the more I've realized that real magical work, it's not about appearing mystical. I mean, go back through some of these videos. I've got like a boring jumper on. There's nothing mystical about that. And that's why people probably skip past these videos, because I'm not looking all cosmic. Wow. If that's all it took, I'd be famous. It's about becoming more conscious, more honest, more aware. And awareness breaks the glamour. I spoke about this last week. Always, always, awareness breaks the glamour. You see through to reality, and that's what the magical path should do, not submerge you more into the illusion. That's the antidote. Awareness, the moment you stop blindly accepting the story, the spell weakens. And this applies spiritually, politically, socially, psychologically, magically, everywhere. Question everything. Read deeply. Do your homework. Please, please, don't just take my word for any of this either. Go and look. Read the stories yourself. Check different translations. You'll start to see the discrepancies and the differences. Compare interpretations. Because if I've learned anything after decades of wandering through druidry and magic and mysticism and hypnosis and symbolism and mythology and all the rest of it, it's that certainty is usually where the glamour enters. I met a lot of sadly very delusioned people who are where they're at because they didn't question. And the deeper mysteries are not protected because they're hidden. They're protected because most people never look beyond the first beautiful story they are handed. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this week's Saturday Grove, which, in the name of the honesty I've been speaking of, is being recorded on a Sunday because somebody went out and had a few too many beers watching some good bands and then ended up chatting to a good friend until 1:30 in the morning. Many blessings, and I'll see you next week. Take care.